Chris Difford is one of Britain's great lyrical storytellers, a songwriter who can turn an overheard conversation, a failing relationship, or an ordinary moment in a South London street into something unforgettable. As the co-founder and lyricist of Squeeze, Chris formed an extraordinary creative partnership with Glenn Tilbrook, and together they gave us songs including Up the Junction, Call for Cats, Tempted, and many, many more. His lyrics are funny, direct, compassionate, and unmistakably British. They introduce us to recognizable people and complicated relationships without judging them or disguising their imperfections. Now, with an upcoming UK tour, I talked to Chris about Squeeze, success, addiction, recovery, and the experiences that shaped his writing, including, of course, Trixies, the remarkable collection of songs that he and Glenn originally wrote as teenagers and finally brought to life more than 50 years later. Chris Difford, welcome. You've spent more than 50 years creating lyrics that, in a sense, go into other people's mouths. But as a boy, you had dyslexia, so words obviously didn't come easy for you. Did songwriting, in a way, just become a way of finishing your sentences or expressing yourself?
That's exactly right. It became a language that I could be connected with and I could understand, and it was the way that I could communicate with other people and get people to enjoy what I was doing, which was really important. So, I would write something, show it to my brother or show it to somebody in the family and get a praise. So everything else that I did at school was not really up to much, but it seemed that when I wrote poems or stories, people seemed to latch onto them.
So the sort of thing that probably made you initially feel inadequate became the thing that made you exceptional.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of odd, isn't it? Dyslexia is very common, of course, and back in those days, in the 60s when I was at school, it was kind of seen, you were kind of seen as being a little bit backward, is what they would say, which made you feel terrible because you thought backward was really, really something awful. But in actual fact, it was a reward. It was something that gave me a new life, I suspect.
I mean, that wording backward, it's interesting, isn't it? Because language develops and changes, and we would never use that word today. Do you,
Mm.
do you think that, in a sense, today we have a greater understanding of how important language is?
I think we've kind of discovered language much more in the last 25 years, I suppose, because, in 2007, the mobile phone came along and people began to understand language in a different way. And in fact, I've just been writing about the fact that the 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 mobile phone kind of became or has become like a parent to a lot of children now. Whereas when I was a kid, if I asked a question, I would be involved in a conversation of understanding. And now mainly children don't ask questions because they can look at a phone and they can get the reward and the answer instantly.
But is that a good thing?
Of course, it isn't, in my opinion, but then I'm 72. So somebody who's 16 or 15 who has a mobile phone and has a relationship with their phone, it's all that they need in life. And I've been interested to read that, a lot of kids have been using therapy on AI, which I find extraordinary, really, because, it can't replace, a human being in a room.
Yeah, and AI gives you the answers that you want to hear, which is really
Yes.
dangerous, Um, did being dyslexic and therefore an outsider at the school make you a better observer of people?
I think it did. You're correct. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the time, I was never really chosen to be in gangs or hang out with the sort of uh, top boys, if you like. So there would be a gaggle of kids, me included, that were at the back of the room who were scrabbling around trying to find something that would glue them all together. And what that was eventually was music. And so we would listen to each other's records, and that was the way that we began to bond as young kids. It was a boys' school, and we were very we were really into sort of anything that was a bit wacky, really. Like King Crimson was a bit wacky for us, but it was something lyrically that I was very drawn to. Pete Sinfield's lyrics were extraordinary. So it was the thing that bonded a few of us together, really.
Yeah, I think the point I'm getting at is that when you are an outsider and you are possibly listening to other people more than they are listening to you, you're also hearing the words, you're hearing the sort of rhythmic expression of the words, and you're also hearing the evasions that people come up with.
Yeah, and in many ways, I'm still an outsider. I sit alone, observing what's going on around me, and that's how I find my inspiration most of the time. And I enjoy that. I think it's really important to have that space. It's also important to have a community where you can share your ideas with like-minded people, and that kind of inspires you to move in a different way.
Yeah, you said in the past that a teacher played you or said to you you should listen to Bob Dylan, and
Mm,
that the idea then of putting words to music made sense to you. What was
yeah.
it that you heard with Dylan? Was it the phrasing? Was it the storytelling? Or was it the idea that poetry, which you were already writing as a child, could become a song?
I think it was the simplicity of it. It wasn't complicated. It was storytelling, but I could understand it. And musically, it wasn't it wasn't sort of like King Crimson. It wasn't going off in all different directions. It was very easily placed in the ear. But it wasn't just him. It was people like Donovan as well, who would tell a story and make you feel welcome. It was folk music of that time. It was anybody who would be able to tell a story that I would find interesting.
When you placed that advert in the sweet shop window, you asked for a guitarist, but there was no band. But so how come you had so much confidence to
Mm.
advertise a future that didn't actually exist in the present?
Oh my God, I suppose I was just a lonely soul looking for friends. And, I did have people that I already had a band, and we'd done a few shows, a few gigs. But I had a bit of a bad experience with a guitar player who I was in a band with, who he wouldn't be interested in any of the lyrics that I had written. I'd bring them to the rehearsal room, and he'd say, well, they're not as good as mine. So we'd just end up doing his songs. And he was a bit of a nuisance, really. But after that, I was kind of exhausted, and I just thought, okay, I'm going to write the songs, and I'm going to find a guitarist who's going to just shut up and play. And that was what I hoped. And there was only two people that answered that ad, and one of them was Glenn.
In a sense, you imagined a band that didn't exist, and then you and Glenn imagined an entire nightclub that you'd never entered. So was imagination the first thing that you possessed before having experience or musical skill, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean that came from very early on in my creation, I think. And Trixies came maybe a year and a half after we'd first met. I'd already been interested in storytelling, and I'd already been interested in musical theatre on a scale. And Trixies was really a super adventurous idea that I never thought would get off the ground. And of course, it didn't get off the ground because it wasn't something that the band at that time could really get their teeth into. We were playing like we'd play like One After 909. We'd play Boogie Woogie. We'd play Beatles songs, we play our own songs, but doing something like Trixies was really advanced. And Glenn had, I think, frustratedly tried to teach us how to play these songs, and it didn't happen.
I mean, much of Trixies was written in Maxine's family home, wasn't it? And she helped you to bring you and Glenn together. So when you returned to those songs, did you feel, in a sense, that you were returning to her a little bit?
My God, that's a really good question. Wow. I'd like to think that now you've said it, because really she was the person that kept us together. I mean, I don't think, a lot of the time we weren't similar in character. We were quite different, and still are, of course. But Maxine would kind of create an atmosphere that would blend our friendship and make it work. I don't think there's been anybody since then, really, who could do that. It was quite a beautiful skill that she had. So Trixies and hundreds of other songs that were written around her house still exist today, and I still think that they're possibly the best songs we've ever written that people have never heard.
What did you recognize in yourself by initially hearing those songs again before, recording and releasing them?
When they were being recorded, I remember we were in Glenn's studio, and Glenn played each song on the piano to Owen, who was producing. And at the end of it, I just wanted to cry, because I was feeling a deep, deep connection with two people that had met 50 years ago and had this incredible bonding of songwriting, and an unspoken journey that was cast in beauty, really. And um, then when I heard the album completed some months later, it was very difficult to not hear it and feel sad, but also feel like everybody had done a fantastic job.
Were you tempted to improve any of your younger self's lyrics, or did you feel protective of them?
No, there was only a few lines that were, let's say, woke. They don't use that word for the time being, that we sort of nicked out. But I mean, I'd say it's pretty much as it was meant to be.
You were very young at that time. I think you were 19, and you were ambitious enough to sort of attempt to make a concept album, which you explained that you couldn't go out and perform because the band weren't technically, if I put it that way, ready. Did your success after that make Squeeze less ambitious?
No, I don't think so, because our ambitions were beyond Trixies. Our ambitions were, let's get on television, let's go to America, let's play bigger clubs, bigger places. Let's find a manager. All of those ambitions were equally as important as writing Trixies and what would ever happen to it. And it was always in the back of my mind that someday that would come back. And thankfully it has.
In Trixies, the club, is it a club, or is it actually the adult world that these two teenagers sort of were waiting to enter?
Well, it's all things. At the time I wasn't really sure what it was about, but I've got more clarity on it now. I'm older and I look back at it, and a friend of mine, she is a script writer, and she used to work in a nightclub in the East End of London where the Craze used to drink. And we were having a coffee, and she was telling me all about the experiences. And I said, "My God, that's exactly like Trixies." And so now in my head, I can see all of the characters living in the same club as she described to me. And I have the backbones of a story that would go with it to make a good play, I believe, but I'm not a playwright. And I showed her my notes eventually, and she said, "Well, you know, what you need is someone to write this for you because you're not very good at it." So I'm prepared to accept that and find somebody who can write a script.
I mean, on the current tour, you've performed Trixies. I think you've performed it in full before the other songs, before, you know,
Yeah,
before the songs that everyone knows. So,
yeah.
what is it like to ask an audience to listen to the band you might have been? I don't know if that's the right way of putting it, but it does feel like it's, you know,
Mm.
the band it might have been before giving them the band that they know.
Well, the thing about playing tricks is from beginning to end is there's a certain discipline about it that I adore. I really love it. It's like being in the theatre itself. You know, you kick off with the first song, and 43 minutes later, you've finished that part of the show. Um, and I think that our audiences are adult enough to accept that. However, we stopped doing it. We did it in Europe and as an experiment, I think, and I think it worked. Um, but I don't know if we're going to do it in America or in the UK. I think we're discussing whether that would work in the time frame that we have.
There's more of Chris coming up in a second. Don't forget to follow, subscribe, look at popthehistorymakers.com for all the other interviews, and just enjoy, hopefully, what I do. And please comment and like. One thing that really came to my mind while hearing those songs, and you sort of said it, you know, that it may be a play or something, but in the 70s, there were all these social realism plays, mainly on the BBC, I think. And I
Yeah.
remember, you know, I remember that from my youth, and I just wondered whether back then you were thinking you're writing pop songs or you're writing miniature television plays.
Well, I was like you, maybe I was. They were in the background while I was a kid, and my mum and dad be watching the Wednesday plays. They'd be written by incredible writers, you know, Tom Stoppard and you know Michael Frayn and all sorts of people would write these things, and you know there would be kitchen sink dramas that would last 40 minutes maximum. They're very dull, some of them, and quite tender, but. Um, um, in fact, one of them, which was a play, became a film called A Taste of Honey, has been something that I've been working on recently as a musical, and it's extraordinary to go back to the late 50s and the early 60s when those plays were written, and how honest they were, and you don't really get that in on television these days, unfortunately.
No, and also they changed society, didn't they? Because they gave us an entrance into a world that we'd never seen before on TV.
Yeah, well, we were looking into our neighbour's living room most of the time, and seeing what was going on, and you know the beautiful scripts that were written were just compelling, and I suppose songs like Up the Junction and other songs that I've written lyrically, they do lean in that direction because that was an inspiration growing up. I couldn't get away from that, and I'm very happy that that was the case.
I mean, but let's talk about Up the Junction because years later, you came back to the characters really in a moving story. Why did those particular characters remain alive for you after the original song ended? Is that what happens? Do they remain in your head?
Interestingly, those characters did because somebody had said to me in an interview or a conversation, "What happened to those people in Up the Junction?" And I went, "Oh, hold on a minute." And I thought about it, and then they came back. They live in Croydon now, you know, and they go to Asda and all the rest of it. So it was that was an interesting sort of turn of events. But having an imagination and having characters that live within is a joy for me, really, and they exist uh, solely for my joy, I think.
Well, is it also that you wanted to give the woman an ending that maybe the man couldn't give her?
Yeah, maybe that's true. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about Tempted because I think that's another track. And the narrator seems to understand that he's destroying something, but unable to stop himself. Was he a fictional character? Was he a version of you, sort of seen from a safe distance?
Yeah, that was definitely true. Those days we were knocking off to America all the time on tour, and the wheel was spinning very quickly. I didn't know what day it was most of the time, and taxi picked me up to take me to Heathrow Airport to go on tour, and I just wrote that down on a fag packet because it was reflective of where I was. I lived around the corner from the laundry on the hill, and my relationships were all a bit upside down. So it was very autobiographical. It was written in that taxi. It didn't take very long. I know that Glenn struggled musically with it, but I'm glad that he did because it's a terrific song.
I mean, although it's called Tempted and it's about temptation, it feels to me it's more about the self-deception that comes before a betrayal.
Yeah, yeah, I guess it was. Yeah, there's plenty of that going on in those days.
Yeah, well, it's a long time ago, which is good, probably.
Very good.
I also want to talk about Cool for Cats because it's sort of boastful, funny, and in a sense, it's not always attractive. Was it satisfying to inhabit a character that was satirizing men you knew, or was it implicating you again?
Really, what it was every verse was inspired by a different TV program that I was watching on television at the time. It wasn't about me at all. It was just observational, I can say. It became like a dead weight around my neck having to sing it all the time when we were younger. I just got a little bit bored with it, but it's probably the only song that I sing in the set these days, so I hold on to it for dear life.
Some fantastic place, which, we talked about Maxine and it preserves Maxine in a song. Um, by writing a song about someone, does it keep them present?
That's a good question too. I think so. Yeah, I think it respects their life and their living, and that's very important. I think that song in particular was extraordinarily moving to write and it is to perform. Um, so whenever we do happen to play it live, of course Maxine is right there in the middle of it all. Because as we said earlier, she was the one that created the silk that sort of embedded the two of us.
Yeah, but okay, did the grief of her passing and also the memories coming up through Trixies, did that allow you and Glenn to say something to each other that you hadn't been able to over the years?
Well, Some Fantastic Place was written in early sobriety for me, so it was a beautiful pink cloud moment, and it, you know, I it was dedicated to her being and to her and his relationship and how strong that was. So it was a gift in a way, and it's almost like she wrote it herself. I, it's there aren't many songs that we've written that are as saturated as that is in emotional depth.
Yeah, I mean, you said that sobriety and recovery have to come first. So is everything you've created since, I think that must have been about the early 90s, 1992, built upon that decision to get sober?
Um, well, it's a daily reprieve. It's tough in a working environment, which is strenuous when you're 72 years old, and you have to really think your day through quite thoroughly. And when I'm writing, I don't question what I write at all. I just let the lyrics flow. I don't question them, whether they're right, wrong, or indifferent. It doesn't bother me. Um, it's just important to get your feelings down. Um, so lyrically, I'm still in a good place. I feel very inspired to write, and mostly from reflection these days, I have to say, but that's not a bad thing.
Did you ever worry back then that sobriety would remove the part of you that could write? I remember like David Lynch talking about therapy in a sort of similar sense and going to a therapist and asking, if I have therapy, will I be able to make the films I'm making? And the therapist said, well, I'm not sure.
No, because they were too, they the therapy for me and the songwriting are two very, very different journeys. Um, and sometimes writing is therapeutic in itself. So I can write something and be my own therapist.
Squeeze are often called this sort of quintessential English band. Um, I know from the members you're not, but it's sort of described in this way. Does that for you make Englishness sound narrower than the music and the members were?
You know, people in the past particularly would want to pigeonhole where your music came from and what it meant. So that description is apt for us with quintessentially an English band. And the Americans particularly love that. Um, I think we're just a band of uh, built around two songwriters who are still knocking about, really, and still manage to um, get in the studio and write songs and make a living more than importantly, because times have changed, and the only way to pay the rent is to go on the road, which is hard.
Yeah, but Squeeze's music was never sort of culturally self-contained, was it? There was like American soul, country, European electronic music, music with a
Yeah,
bit of punk, and there was the
yeah,
multicultural reality probably of South London. So
yeah,
it's,
yeah. Well,
it's
I think Glenn's influences are huge. He's inspired by so many. His record collection's vast, and so he can be inspired by all sorts of things, and that's what makes Squeeze different.
by rediscovering this album, Trixies. Uh, do you see Britain of that time as multicultural when you were growing up? Or was it just a sort of unremarkable reality of that you were in at that time?
Um, Not as multicultural as it is now, of course, but I went to school with people from Ghana, from Jamaica, from all over the world, really. It was a boys' school, and we were all multicultural, and we mixed together pretty well, I have to say. So, that really was, and musically, although when I was at school, I was into the King Crimson, the Yes kind of music, the prog rock stuff. But when I would be at home, I would be listening to reggae and Tamil Motown with my mates. So, I really had quite a sort of arc of music that was going on.
You teach songwriting, don't you?
No, I don't. I facilitate songwriting.
Ah,
I don't teach
okay.
it. I
Okay.
tried.
What do you mean by facilitate?
Well, I put people in rooms and tell them that this is what they're going to do for the rest of the day, and hope that something happens. And it normally does. I've been running songwriting workshops for 33 years, and the thing that I enjoy most is that people become friends forever, and they write songs and keep in touch, and that's really what it's all about.
But do you talk about observation as a method of songwriting?
I do. I do to some, but not all. The, the the workshops are quite varied. Some of them are very professional, and I don't need to say very much. And some of them are for younger people who are looking for a route to go down. So I give them ideas.
How do you see songwriting in terms of groups of people writing? Because, you know, a lot of chart music today is the product of teams of songwriters.
Well, it has been, but I don't think so much. You know, here I am in Nashville, and the songwriting here is superb. It's like, you know, it's like a culture all of its own. Um, so, you know, I'm not interested in whether it's a team of people that are writing it or it's one person that's written it. As long as it's a great song, that's all that I'm inspired by.
I mean, you mentioned that you're 72. Through this album, have you started to feel closer to the boy who began writing or further away from him?
Well, I adore all this, you know, when I go back and I listen to some of the demos we wrote around the same time, I really love all those early songs that we've written. I hope they get to see the light of day. Um, you know, because they were songs that were written without baggage and without any overthinking, or, you know, they just came out of the sky, out of the spirit. I think as you get older, you can fall in the trap of overthinking your imagination and the way that you write, and that takes up time. And when you take up time, you lose the energy of the original idea, I believe.
Is Trixies really the closing of a circle, or is it like the start of a new creative period?
Well, that's a good question. I feel that it is the closing of a circle in many ways. These are two writers that have been writing for 50 years, and we've had so much attention around this album. It's gonna, you know, it's a very high bar to follow, and you know, I don't think that really phases us as writers particularly. It's not like we have to do that. We don't have to beat the last thing we've done. I don't think. I think it's just important to write a good song. And if you can write a good song, then the rest is history.
Maybe I'm making too much of this, but it made me feel like it's sort of a resolution of unfinished business between you and Glenn.
Well, it's unfinished in a way that it is finished because we've recorded it and it's done. But I'm very happy with it, and I think Owen, the producer, did a fantastic job. And it's an emotional journey listening to it.
He also changed the order, didn't he, in terms of
Yeah,
the tracks?
yes,
Yeah.
not the order I would have had, but it's amazing.
So how is it for you to give over the responsibility to someone else then for what you've created initially?
I think trust is everything. You know, if you're with somebody you can trust, there's a beauty in that. And I couldn't do what he does. So therefore, I'm happy to hand over those experiences to somebody who's got more of a handle on it than I do.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Christopher, for this interview, but I also want to thank you because uh, you have had an immense contribution to popular culture, to my life, to, you know, all our lives of the people that are watching this, and has
Thank you.
enriched our world. So at the end, I just want to give you a big thank you.
Well, that's really kind, Steve. So that's made my day. I will go and have a nice roast sandwich.
Brilliant, Chris. Okay, see you again.
See you.
Bye.
See you, Steve. Bye.
Up there is an interview I recommend. Down there is where you can find all the podcast interviews. And here is where you can connect.